The telegram arrived on the same morning they buried Thomas Foster in the hard Arizona dirt, and Louise Foster's hands shook so violently reading it that the paper tore along the creases. The bank was calling in his debts, all $7,000 of them, and she had 30 days to settle or lose everything, including the small ranch house on the edge of Sierra Vista that had been her home for 3 years of marriage. Louise stood in the parlor, still wearing her black mourning dress, staring at the words that blurred through her tears. Thomas had been 29 when the fever took him, leaving her a widow at 24 with nothing but empty promises and a pile of bills she had never known existed. He had always handled the money, always told her not to worry her pretty head about finances. Now she understood why he had kept her in the dark. The gambling debts alone amounted to $3,000, owed to various establishments between Sierra Vista and Tucson. The rest was borrowed money for cattle that had never materialized, for equipment he had sold without telling her, for schemes and investments that had evaporated like water in the desert heat. She walked through the small house, seeing it with new eyes. Everything would have to go. The furniture, the dishes, her mother's silver candlesticks that Thomas had promised never to touch. Even if she sold it all, she would barely make a dent in what was owed. The ranch itself, 20 acres of scrubland with a creek that ran dry 6 months of the year, might fetch $1,000 if she was lucky. The house needed repairs she could not afford. The barn leaned to one side like a drunk on Saturday night. Louise sank into a chair at the kitchen table and let herself cry for the first time since Thomas had died. She cried for her foolishness in trusting him completely, for the future she had imagined that would never come to pass, for the shame of being left with nothing but debt by a man who had sworn to love and protect her. The August heat pressed against the windows, and the flies buzzed around the sugar bowl, and the world kept turning while her life fell apart. A knock at the door startled her from her misery. She wiped her eyes quickly and smoothed her dress before answering. A man stood on her porch, tall and lean with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of sage. He held his hat in his hands, and his dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, with the kind of face that suggested he smiled often despite the serious expression he wore now. "Mrs. Foster, I am sorry to disturb you on such a day. My name is Vincent Vale. I worked with your husband on a cattle drive 2 years back." Louise felt her stomach drop. Another creditor, another debt she had not known about. "If you are here for money, I am afraid I have none to give you. I have just learned the extent of my late husband's obligations, and I cannot pay what I do not have." Vincent shook his head quickly. "No, madam. That is not why I am here. Your husband actually owed me nothing. The opposite, in fact. I owed him $100 from a loan he gave me when my horse went lame on that drive. I have come to repay it." He pulled a worn leather pouch from his pocket and held it out to her. Louise stared at it as if it might be a mirage. $100. "Yes, madam. It took me a while to save it up, and I am ashamed it has taken me so long. I heard about Thomas passing, and I wanted to make sure his widow received what was rightfully hers." Louise took the pouch with trembling hands. $100 would not solve her problems, but it was more money than she had seen in months. Thomas had always told her they were barely scraping by, that every penny had to be stretched. She had believed him while he was spending money on cards and whiskey in town. "Thank you, Mr. Vale. This is very kind of you. Most men would have considered the debt canceled upon my husband's death." "A debt is a debt, Mrs. Foster, and your husband helped me when I needed it. I pay my obligations." She noticed how he said it, with just the slightest emphasis that suggested he knew not everyone shared that philosophy. He knew about Thomas then, or at least suspected, The shame burned in her cheeks. "Would you like to come in for some water or coffee?" "It is a hot day to be riding." Vincent hesitated, then nodded. "Water would be appreciated, madam, if it is not too much trouble." Louise led him into the kitchen and pumped water into a tin cup. He drank it in long swallows, and she found herself noticing the way his throat moved, the strength in his hands. She looked away quickly, feeling guilty for noticing anything about any man so soon after burying her husband. "Forgive me for asking, Mrs. Foster, but are you managing all right out here on your own? This is not an easy place for a woman alone." The concern in his voice was genuine, and it broke something loose inside her. "No, Mr. Vale, I am not managing. I discovered this morning that my husband left me with $7,000 in debts. I have 30 days before the bank takes everything. I do not even know where to begin." She had not meant to tell him. It was not proper to discuss such things with a stranger. But the words came out in a rush, and once they started, she could not seem to stop them. She told him about the gambling debts, the false investments, the lies Thomas had told her. Vincent listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she spoke. When she finally fell silent, he set down his cup and looked at her steadily. "Mrs. Foster, I know we are not acquainted, but I would like to help you if you will allow it. I have some experience with ledgers and accounts. Perhaps I could look over your husband's papers and see if there is anything that can be disputed or negotiated. Sometimes debts are not as ironclad as creditors would like you to believe. I could not ask you to do that. You have already been more than generous. You are not asking. I am offering. I cannot abide the thought of a decent woman being thrown to the wolves because of her husband's poor choices. At least let me look at the papers. If I cannot help, you are no worse off than you are now." Louise wanted to refuse out of pride, but pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She nodded slowly. "All right, thank you. The papers are in the desk in the parlor. I have not had the courage to go through all of them yet." They spent the rest of the afternoon sorting through Thomas's records, and with each new discovery, Louise felt the weight of her situation pressing heavier on her chest. Vincent worked methodically, making notes on a piece of paper, asking her occasional questions. His presence was oddly comforting. He did not judge her or make her feel foolish for not knowing about her husband's affairs. He simply worked. As the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Vincent sat back and rubbed his eyes. "All right. Here is what I have found. Of the 7,000, about 2,000 is legitimate debt to the bank for the mortgage and operating costs. The gambling debts are not legally enforceable in this territory, though the men he owed may not see it that way. The remaining 2,000 is listed as investments with a man named Cyrus Thornton, but I know Thornton. He is a snake who preys on desperate men. I would wager those investments never existed at all. So, what does that mean? It means you legitimately owe 2,000 to the bank. The rest you can dispute or ignore, though that may cause you problems. The real question is whether you want to stay here or start fresh somewhere else." Louise looked around the small parlor. "I do not know. This house has not been much of a home, but it is all I have known for 3 years. Where would I even go? That is something to think on. But first, we need to deal with the immediate problem. The bank wants their money in 30 days. This property is not worth 2,000, but I believe we could sell it for 800 to 1,000 if we fix it up a bit. The remaining debt could potentially be negotiated down or put on a payment plan if you have income coming in. But I have no income. I have no skills, no training. Thomas never wanted me to work." Vincent met her eyes. "Everyone has skills, Mrs. Foster, and everyone can learn. The question is whether you are willing to try." Something in his tone, in the way he looked at her without pity but with respect, made Louise sit up straighter. Yes, yes, I am willing to try. I am willing to do whatever it takes. A slow smile crossed Vincent's face, and she realized he was even more handsome when he smiled. Good. Then here is what I suggest. I own a small ranch about 5 miles north of here. Nothing fancy, but I run cattle and breed horses. I could use help with the bookkeeping and the household tasks. The pay would not be much to start, but it would be honest work and enough to start saving towards settling your debts. In the meantime, we fix up this property and find a buyer. What do you say? Louise felt her heart hammering. You would hire me, but you barely know me. I know enough. I know you are in a difficult situation through no fault of your own. I know you are willing to work. And I know that your husband was a good man when he was sober and honest, which means he saw something fine in you when he married you. That is good enough for me. She wanted to point out that Thomas had clearly been neither sober nor honest much of the time, but Vincent's faith in her, unearned as it was, made her throat tight with emotion. Then yes, I accept. When would you like me to start? Tomorrow, if you are able. I will ride out early and help you pack what you need. You can stay in the spare room at my ranch until we figure out a more permanent solution. It would not be proper for you to be staying under my roof without a chaperone, so my aunt who lives with me will make it respectable. Relief flooded through Louise. She had not even thought about the impropriety, but Vincent had. He was trying to protect her reputation even as he helped her. Thank you, Mr. Vale. I do not know what I did to deserve such kindness, but I will work hard to earn it. You deserve it simply by being a person in need, Mrs. Foster. Now, I should head back before dark. I will see you first thing in the morning. After he left, Louise stood in the doorway watching him ride away on a sturdy bay gelding. The desert stretched out in all directions, vast and unforgiving, but for the first time since reading that telegram, she felt a small flicker of hope. She had no idea if she could truly start over, if she could pay off Thomas's debts and build a new life. But Vincent Vale believed she could, and that belief was something to hold on to in the darkness. She spent the evening packing her few personal belongings into a trunk. Her clothes, her mother's silver candlesticks that somehow Thomas had never sold, a few books she had brought from her childhood home in Missouri. It all fit easily into one trunk and a carpet bag. 3 years of marriage reduced to so little. As she lay in bed that night, she thought about Vincent. There was something solid about him, something trustworthy. He had ridden out here to repay a debt he could have easily ignored. He had spent hours helping her sort through Thomas's mess. He had offered her work and shelter without asking for anything in return. She barely knew him, but she felt safer than she had in a long time. Vincent arrived just after dawn, riding up with a small wagon. He helped her load her trunk and looked around the property with an appraising eye. The structure is sound. Needs some cosmetic work, some repairs on the barn and fencing. I know a few men who might be interested in a small property like this if we can make it presentable. Whatever you think is best. The ride to Vincent's ranch took about an hour over rough terrain. The desert was beautiful in the early morning light, the heat not yet oppressive. Vincent pointed out landmarks and told her about the area. He had been raised in Texas, but had come to Arizona 5 years ago, drawn by the promise of open land and opportunity. He had built his ranch from nothing, working cattle drives and saving every penny until he could buy his own herd and his own land. It has not been easy, but it has been mine. That counts for something. Louise understood what he meant. She had never owned anything truly her own. Even the clothes on her back had been bought with Thomas's money, and now she knew that money had been borrowed or won at cards. The thought of earning her own way, of owing nothing to anyone, was both terrifying and thrilling. Vincent's ranch was larger than she had expected. The main house was a solid adobe structure with a wide porch and a red tile roof. The barn and outbuildings were well maintained, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. Horses moved in a large corral, their coats gleaming in the sun. A woman came out onto the porch as they pulled up. She was in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a bun and a no-nonsense expression that softened when she smiled. "You must be Mrs. Foster. I am Dorothy Vale, Vincent's aunt. Welcome to our home." "Thank you, Mrs. Vale, and please call me Louise. Only if you call me Dorothy." "Now come inside out of this sun before you melt. Vincent, bring her trunk to the spare room." Dorothy led her into a cool, comfortable kitchen with a big cast-iron stove and a table that could seat 8. The house was simple but clean and welcoming. The spare room was small but had a real bed with a quilt, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "It is not much, but it is yours for as long as you need it," Dorothy said. "Vincent told me about your situation. I am very sorry for your loss and for the troubles your husband left behind." Louise appreciated that Dorothy did not pretend the troubles did not exist. "Thank you. I am grateful to you both for taking me in. I promise I will earn my keep. I have no doubt. Vincent is a good judge of character. Now, I imagine you are hungry. Let me fix you some breakfast and then Vincent can show you around." Over eggs and biscuits, Dorothy explained the household routine. She did most of the cooking but would welcome help with the cleaning, laundry, and garden. Vincent needed someone to manage the books and handle correspondence with buyers and suppliers. He had been doing it himself, but he was better with horses than with paperwork. After breakfast, Vincent showed Louise the ranch. He introduced her to his 3 hired hands, Miguel, James, and an older man named Walter who had been a cowboy his whole life. They tipped their hats respectfully and went back to work. Vincent showed her the cattle, the horses he was training, the chickens and pigs Dorothy kept near the house. "It is a lot to take in, I know, but you do not need to learn it all at once. We will start with the books, get you familiar with how things run. The rest will come with time." They spent the afternoon in Vincent's small office, a room off the main parlor with a desk, shelves of ledgers and maps on the walls. He explained his system, showed her the accounts, walked her through recent transactions. Louise had always been good with numbers, and she found herself understanding more quickly than she had expected. "You have a head for this," Vincent said, sounding pleased. "That will make things easier. My father was a shopkeeper in Missouri. He used to let me help with the accounts when I was young. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed it." "Why did you stop?" "My father died when I was 17. My mother and I moved in with my aunt, and then I met Thomas at a church social. He courted me for 6 months, and we married when I turned 21. He did not want me working. He said it was his job to provide." Vincent's expression darkened slightly. "Providing means more than just earning money. It means being honest about what you can and cannot afford. It means not leaving your wife to clean up your mistakes." Louise felt a rush of gratitude for his anger on her behalf. Thomas's friends had all acted as if she should be grateful for the 3 years she had been married to him, as if his dying absolved him of all wrongdoing. Vincent saw things more clearly. They worked together until dinner time, and then Dorothy called them to the table. The meal was simple but delicious, beef stew with fresh bread. The conversation flowed easily, touching on ranch business, town gossip, and lighter topics. Louise found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. This house felt more like a home in one day than her own house had in 3 years. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Vincent's ranch, Louise thought about how quickly her life had changed. A week ago, She had been a respectable married woman with a home and a future, however uncertain. Now she was a widow and a debtor, living on the charity of a man she had just met. But somehow this felt more real, more solid than anything she had known with Thomas. Vincent dealt in facts and hard work, not dreams and promises. She could build something on that foundation. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Louise woke early, helped Dorothy with breakfast, then spent the morning working on the ranch accounts. Vincent was meticulous in his record-keeping, but there was a backlog of filing and correspondence to catch up on. In the afternoons, she helped with household tasks or worked in Dorothy's vegetable garden. The work was harder than anything she had done in years, but it felt good to be useful. Vincent was patient and encouraging, answering her questions without making her feel ignorant. He treated her as a partner in running the ranch, asking her opinion on purchases and decisions. It was strange and wonderful to have her thoughts valued. On Sundays, they all went to church in Sierra Vista. Louise felt the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations. Everyone knew Thomas had died, and everyone knew she was living at Vincent Vale's ranch. The gossips were having a field day speculating about what that meant. Vincent walked beside her with his head high, daring anyone to say something improper. No one did, at least not within earshot, after church one Sunday, about 3 weeks after Louise had moved to the ranch. A well-dressed man approached them as they were climbing into the wagon. He was in his late 40s with slicked-back hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Mrs. Foster, a word if I may. I am Cyrus Thornton. I believe your late husband and I had some business dealings." Louise felt Vincent tense beside her. "Mr. Thornton." "Yes, I saw your name in my husband's papers. Something about investments." "Exactly. Your husband invested $2,000 with me in a cattle venture. Unfortunately, the venture has not yet turned a profit, but I wanted to assure you that your investment is secure. These things take time." Vincent stepped forward slightly, placing himself between Louise and Thornton. "Funny thing about that, Thornton. Mrs. Foster has been going through her husband's records, and there is no documentation of any cattle venture. No contracts, no receipts, nothing but a promissory note with your signature." Thornton's smile tightened. "Thomas and I did business on a handshake. That is how gentlemen operate. Gentlemen also provide documentation. Without proof of where that money went, Mrs. Foster has no obligation to honor any claims you might make. Now see here, Vale. This is between Mrs. Foster and myself. I do not see what business it is of yours. Mrs. Foster works for me, which makes it my business. And I am telling you now, if you want to collect on any alleged debt, you will need to provide proof in a court of law. Otherwise, I suggest you move along." Thornton's face flushed with anger. "This is not over. Thomas Foster owed me money and I intend to collect. Then take it up with a judge." Thornton looked at Louise, his expression hardening. "You are making a mistake, Mrs. Foster, listening to this cowboy. Thomas was a good man who made some unfortunate investments. The least you can do is honor his obligations." Louise found her voice, though it shook slightly. "Mr. Thornton, my husband left me with nothing but debts and lies. I will honor legitimate obligations, but I will not hand over money to every man who claims he is owed. If you have proof of this cattle venture, show it to me. Otherwise, please leave me alone." Thornton stared at her for a long moment, then turned on his heel and stalked away. Louise felt her knees go weak, and Vincent steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "That was well said. He is a bully, and bullies back down when you stand up to them. I have never spoken to anyone like that before. Thomas always handled such things. You handled it just fine, and you need to get used to standing up for yourself. There will be others like Thornton who try to take advantage." They drove back to the ranch in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. Dorothy patted Louise's hand and told her she had done the right thing. That night, as Louise worked on the account books, she felt a strange sense of accomplishment. She had faced down a man trying to cheat her, and she had not crumbled. Maybe she was stronger than she had thought. As summer faded into fall, Vincent and his hired hands worked on fixing up Louise's property in their spare time. They repaired the barn, fixed the fencing, and painted the house. Louise helped when she could, learning how to swing a hammer and patch wood. The work was hard and hot, but she liked seeing the tangible results of their labor. Vincent found a buyer in early October, a young couple looking to start their own ranch. They offered $900, which was more than Louise had hoped for. She signed the papers with shaking hands, watching her old life officially end. The money went straight toward her debt with the bank, along with most of the $100 Vincent had given her and the wages she had saved from working at the ranch. The bank manager, a stern man named Harold Preston, looked over her payment and the revised payment plan Vincent had negotiated. "This covers about half of what you owe, Mrs. Foster. The remainder will need to be paid in monthly installments. Can you commit to that?" "Yes, sir. I have steady employment now. It will take me about a year to pay it all off, but I will." Preston studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. See that you do. I would hate to have to take legal action." Outside the bank, Vincent was waiting with the wagon. "How did it go?" "I have a payment plan. 1 year to clear the debt completely." "That is good news. You are on your way to being free and clear." Louise climbed into the wagon, feeling lighter than she had in months. "I could not have done any of this without you, Vincent. You saved me when I had nowhere else to turn. I will never be able to repay you." Vincent glanced at her, his sage green eyes warm. "You do not owe me anything, Louise. You have worked hard and earned every bit of help you have gotten. I am proud of you." The simple words made her throat tight. Thomas had never said he was proud of her. He had barely noticed what she did. Vincent saw her, truly saw her, and valued her. The realization made her heart beat faster. Over the next few months, Louise settled fully into life at the ranch. She was no longer a temporary guest, but a real part of the household. She managed the accounts with growing confidence, helped Dorothy with the daily chores, and even learned to ride well enough to check the fence lines with Vincent. The hired hands treated her with respect, and she found herself laughing more than she had in years. Vincent was always kind, always patient, but she began to notice small things. The way he watched her when he thought she was not looking. The way he found excuses to spend time with her, showing her the horses or asking her opinion on ranch matters. The way his hand would linger when he helped her down from the wagon. She told herself she was imagining things, that he was just being kind, but her heart knew the truth. She was falling in love with him. It terrified her. Thomas had been dead less than 6 months. It was too soon to even think about another man, let alone one who had been so generous to her. What if Vincent was just being kind? What if she was projecting her gratitude onto him and mistaking it for love? What if he saw her as a charity case, nothing more? She tried to push the feelings down, to focus on her work and her debt and her future. But it was impossible to ignore the way her heart lifted when Vincent walked into a room, the way she found herself watching him work with the horses, all grace and strength. She dreamed about him at night, dreams that left her flushed and confused in the morning. Dorothy noticed, of course. One afternoon in early December, as they were making preserves in the kitchen, the older woman said casually, "You know, Vincent has been happier these past few months than I have seen him in years." Louise kept her eyes on the pot she was stirring. "He has reason to be. The ranch is doing well." "The ranch was doing well before. This is different," He smiles more, sings sometimes while he is working. I have not heard him sing since his parents died 5 years ago. I am glad he is happy. It is because of you, Louise. Surely you see that." Louise set down her spoon and looked at Dorothy. "I do not want to assume anything. Vincent has been so kind to me. I would not want to ruin what we have by misunderstanding his intentions." Dorothy smiled. "Oh, my dear girl, Vincent is not that complicated. He cares for you. Anyone with eyes can see it. The question is whether you care for him." "I do," Louise whispered. "But it has only been 6 months since Thomas died. People will talk. They already think poorly of me for living here. People will always talk. The question is whether you are going to let their talk stop you from being happy. You did not have a real marriage with Thomas. You have mourned him appropriately. There is no shame in moving forward with your life. But what if I am wrong? What if Vincent sees me as an obligation, not a partner? Then ask him. Vincent is honest to a fault. He will tell you the truth." Louise thought about that conversation for days. She wanted to talk to Vincent to understand what he felt, but fear held her back. What if she was wrong? What if she ruined everything? The opportunity came a week before Christmas. Vincent had ridden out to check on the cattle in the far pasture, and Louise decided to bring him lunch. She packed bread, cheese, and apples into a saddlebag and rode out on the gentle mare Vincent had been teaching her to ride. She found him by the creek, letting his horse drink. He looked up in surprise when she approached. "Louise, is everything all right? Everything is fine. I thought you might be hungry." His face broke into a smile. "That is very thoughtful, thank you." They sat by the creek and ate in comfortable silence for a while. The December day was cool but pleasant, the sky a brilliant blue. Louise watched the water flow over the rocks and tried to gather her courage. "Vincent, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you help me?" "Back in August, when you came to my house, you could have just left the money and ridden away. But you stayed and helped me sort through everything. You gave me a job and a place to stay." "Why?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, studying the creek. "Do you want the simple answer or the true answer?" "The true answer." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "The simple answer is that I could not stand by and watch someone suffer when I had the means to help. The true answer is that the moment I saw you standing in that doorway, looking so lost and scared but still holding your head high, I knew I could not walk away. I told myself I was just doing the right thing, just repaying a debt and helping a widow in need. But the truth is, I wanted to be near you. I wanted to help you because I cared what happened to you, and the more time I spent with you, the more I cared." Louise's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You cared about me, even then when you barely knew me." "I know it sounds foolish, but yes. And now, after these past months of working beside you, watching you face your troubles with such courage and grace, I do not just care for you. I love you, Louise. I have loved you for months now. I have tried to be patient to give you time to grieve and heal. But I cannot pretend anymore. I love you, and I want you to stay here not as my employee but as my wife, if you will have me." Tears spilled down Louise's cheeks. "I thought I was imagining it. I thought maybe I was so grateful for your help that I was confusing gratitude with love. But it is not gratitude, Vincent. I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you that first day when you treated me with such respect and kindness. You made me feel valued for the first time in my life. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself." Vincent reached out and cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Then say you will marry me. Say you will build a life with me here. I know it has not been long since Thomas died and people will talk, but I do not care about that. I care about you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a future with you, a real partnership based on trust and honesty and love. Yes, Louise breathed. Yes, I will marry you. Vincent kissed her then, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was nothing like the perfunctory kisses Thomas had given her. This was passion and tenderness, promise and desire. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I will make you happy, Louise. I swear I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this. I could never regret this. You gave me my life back, Vincent. You helped me start over without shame, without judgment. You saw me as a person, not a burden. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. They rode back to the ranch together, and when they told Dorothy the news, she laughed and said she had been wondering when they would finally figure it out. They decided to wait until after Louise had paid off her debts to have the wedding. She wanted to start their marriage free and clear, with nothing hanging over them. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness. Louise worked hard to make her monthly payments, and Vincent worked beside her, never letting her feel alone in her struggles. They stole moments together when they could, kisses in the barn, conversations under the stars, plans for their future. Louise felt like a different person from the broken widow who had stood in her kitchen reading that telegram. She was stronger now, more confident. She knew her own worth. In early March, Louise made her final payment to the bank. Harold Preston stamped her papers with a satisfied nod and said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Foster. You are officially debt-free. I will admit, I did not think you would manage it. You have proven me wrong." "Thank you, Mr. Preston. I had a lot of help. Nevertheless, you should be proud. Many people in your situation would have simply given up." Outside, Vincent was waiting. When she showed him the stamped papers declaring her debts paid in full, he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. "You did it." "I knew you could. We did it. I could never have managed alone. Then we make a good team. Now how about we set a date for that wedding?" They were married on a warm day in April in the small church in Sierra Vista. Louise wore a simple blue dress that Dorothy had helped her sew, and Vincent wore his best suit. The church was full, not just with friends and neighbors, but with people from town who had watched Louise's transformation from grieving widow to confident woman. Miguel, James, and Walter stood as groomsmen, and Dorothy stood with Louise. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, and when Vincent kissed his bride, there was not a dry eye in the church. The ranch became officially theirs together, a true partnership in every sense. Louise managed the business side while Vincent handled the cattle and horses. They worked together seamlessly, building on the foundation Vincent had started. The ranch grew and prospered under their joint management. A year after they married, Louise discovered she was expecting a child. Vincent was overjoyed, fussing over her and insisting she not work too hard. She laughed at his concern but secretly loved how protective he was. Their son was born in February, a healthy baby with his father's sage green eyes. They named him Samuel, after Vincent's father. Life settled into a happy rhythm. Samuel grew from baby to toddler, running around the ranch and learning to ride before he could barely walk. Louise and Vincent added to their herd, bought more land, and built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Dorothy continued to live with them, doting on her great-nephew and helping Louise with the children when their daughter, Rose, was born 2 years after Samuel. On their 5th anniversary, Vincent and Louise sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the desert. Samuel was playing with a toy horse in the yard, and Rose was asleep in Louise's arms. Vincent put his arm around his wife and pulled her close. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Louise asked quietly. "Every day. If I had not decided to repay that debt to Thomas, if you had not let me help you, if we had not taken a chance on each other. I used to be so ashamed of what Thomas left me with. All that debt, all those lies. I felt like I had failed somehow, like I should have known. You had nothing to be ashamed of. None of it was your fault. I know that now. But it took you believing in me for me to believe in myself. You gave me a chance to start over, to build something real. You never made me feel like I was less than you, even when I had nothing. Vincent kissed the top of her head. You always had everything that mattered: strength, intelligence, courage. I just helped you see it in yourself. We saved each other, I think. You gave me a new life, and I gave you someone to share yours with. That is the truth of it. We are better together than we ever were apart. Samuel ran up to the porch, holding his toy horse. Papa, tell me the story about how you met Mama. Vincent laughed and pulled his son onto his lap. Again, I told you that story last night, but I like it. Tell it again. Louise smiled as Vincent began the tale, embellishing it for their son's amusement. She looked out over the ranch, at the land they had built together, at the family they had created. Her first marriage had been built on lies and false promises. This one was built on honesty, hard work, and genuine love. She had started with nothing but debt and shame, a widow with no prospects and no hope. Vincent had seen past all of that to the woman she could become. He had helped her rebuild her life without judgment, without expectations beyond honest work and mutual respect. He had fallen in love with her when she was at her lowest, and he had lifted her up until she could stand on her own. Now they stood together, equal partners in every way. The debts were long paid, the shame washed away by years of honest living. What remained was a love deeper than Louise had ever imagined possible, a partnership that made both of them stronger, and a family that filled their home with laughter and joy. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Louise sent Samuel off to wash up for supper. She stood with Rose in her arms and Vincent at her side, looking at the life they had built together from the ashes of her past. She had learned that true love was not about grand promises or easy words. It was about showing up day after day, about believing in someone when they could not believe in themselves, about building something real and lasting together. Vincent Vale had ridden into her life when she needed him most, and he had never left. He had helped her start over without shame, and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift of all, a future worth living, and a love worth holding on to forever. Years continued to pass in contentment. The ranch expanded until it was one of the largest and most successful in the territory. Samuel grew into a fine young man who shared his father's skill with horses, and Rose became a bright, spirited girl who kept the whole household on their toes. Dorothy lived to see both grandchildren grow nearly to adulthood, before passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, content in the knowledge that her nephew had found happiness. When Samuel was 15 and Rose was 13, Vincent and Louise surprised them with the news that another baby was on the way. The children were delighted, and when little Thomas was born, named after Louise's first husband in a gesture of forgiveness and peace, he was welcomed with open arms by the entire family. Louise never forgot where she had come from, the desperate widow buried under debts she had not known existed. But she also never let that define her. She became known throughout Sierra Vista and beyond as a woman of strength and business acumen. Other widows and women in difficult situations sought her counsel, and she always gave it freely, remembering how Vincent had helped her when she had nothing. Vincent's hair began to gray at the temples, and Louise found she loved him even more with age, this man who had believed in her when no one else did. They still worked together every day, managing the ranch as true partners. They still stole kisses in the barn when they thought no one was watching. They still sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. On their 20th anniversary, Vincent gave Louise a leather-bound ledger. Inside, on the first page, he had written, "To my beloved wife, who turned $100 debt into a lifetime of riches. You are my greatest investment and the best return I ever received. All my love, Vincent." Louise cried when she read it, and then she laughed, and then she kissed him thoroughly while their grown children pretended to be scandalized. That ledger became a family journal filled with stories and memories, a record of the life they built together from nothing but hard work, honesty, and love. When Louise turned 50, she looked back on her life with satisfaction. She had survived poverty and debt, shame and loss. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up with the help of a good man who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. She had raised 3 beautiful children and helped build a prosperous ranch. She had proven that a woman could be strong and capable, that she could overcome any obstacle with determination and support. But most importantly, she had learned what real love looked like. It was not the pretty words and empty promises of her youth. It was Vincent's hand in hers after a long day's work. It was the way he still looked at her as if she was the most precious thing in his world. It was building a life together, piece by piece, through good times and bad. It was choosing each other every single day, year after year, until choosing each other became as natural as breathing. Samuel married a lovely young woman from Tucson when he was 23, and they gave Louise and Vincent their first grandchildren, twin boys with their grandfather's sage green eyes. Rose married a banker's son from Sierra Vista when she was 20, a good man who respected her intelligence and spirit. Young Thomas, as they called him to distinguish him from Louise's first husband, showed signs of becoming a lawyer, devouring books on law and justice with passionate intensity. Louise and Vincent grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced the challenges that came with age, the aches and pains, the slower pace, with the same partnership that had seen them through everything else. Vincent's hands grew gnarled from years of ranch work, but they were still gentle when they touched Louise's face. Louise's dark hair turned silver, but Vincent told her she was more beautiful than ever, and she believed him because she knew he always told her the truth. One evening, when they were both in their early 60s, they sat on the porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. The ranch was now run primarily by Samuel and the hired hands, though Vincent still consulted on major decisions. Louise had trained Rose's husband to manage the books, passing on her knowledge to the next generation. "Did you ever imagine we would end up here?" Louise asked, her hand in Vincent's. "All those years ago when you rode up to my door with that $100. Vincent smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "I imagined a lot of things that day, but the reality turned out better than any of my imaginings. You exceeded every expectation, Louise. You always have. I would have lost everything if not for you. The house, my dignity, maybe even my life. I was so lost, so broken. You were never broken, just bent, and you straightened yourself out with a little help. That strength was always in you. I just gave you a chance to find it. You gave me more than that. You gave me respect, partnership, love. You never held my past against me, never made me feel like I owed you. You treated me as an equal even when I had nothing. Because you were my equal, you always were, and you became my better in so many ways." Louise leaned her head on his shoulder, content. "We built a good life, did we not? The best life, the only life I ever wanted." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. The desert stretched out before them, the land they had worked and loved for so many years. Their grandchildren's laughter rang through the air, a promise that the life they had built would continue long after they were gone. Louise thought about that terrified young widow who had stood in her kitchen, reading a telegram that destroyed her world. She thought about the shame and fear, the overwhelming debt, the certainty that her life was over. And then she thought about the tall cowboy who had appeared on her doorstep with honest eyes and $100, offering help without judgment, seeing potential where she saw only failure. Vincent Vale had not just helped her start over. He had helped her become the woman she was meant to be. He had loved her when she was at her lowest, believed in her when she did not believe in herself, and built a life with her based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. He had never made her feel ashamed of her past or the circumstances that had brought her to his door. He had simply offered his hand and walked beside her into the future. That was the greatest love story Louise could imagine, not one of sweeping romance and grand gestures, but one of daily kindness, honest work, and unwavering support. They had built their love brick by brick, day by day, until it was strong enough to weather any storm. As the stars began to appear, Vincent helped Louise to her feet, and they walked inside together, their hands still clasped. Behind them, the desert night settled over the ranch, peaceful and still. The cattle lowed softly in the distance, the horses nickered in the barn, and somewhere an owl called to its mate. Inside the house, surrounded by family and the life they had created, Louise and Vincent sat down to dinner. The table was full, noisy with conversation and laughter. Samuel's twins were arguing about whose turn it was to help with the dishes. Rose was telling a story about something funny that had happened in town. Young Thomas was reading a law book even at the dinner table, earning a gentle reprimand from his mother. Dorothy's empty chair still sat at the table, a reminder of the woman who had made their early happiness respectable and whose wisdom had guided them through many trials. Vincent said grace, thanking God for the food, the family, and the many blessings they had received. As they ate, Louise caught Vincent's eye across the table. He winked at her, that same mischievous wink that had made her heart flutter 20 years ago. She smiled back, her heart full to bursting with love and gratitude. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and the children had all gone home or to bed, Louise and Vincent prepared for sleep. They moved through the familiar routine with practiced ease, comfortable in their long partnership. As they lay in bed together, Vincent pulled Louise close and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I never get tired of saying it." "I love you too," Vincent replied, kissing the top of her head. "I never get tired of hearing it." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms just as they had every night for 20 years. Outside, the desert wind whispered through the sage, and the moon rose over the mountains, casting silver light across the land. Louise's story had begun with loss and debt, with shame and desperation. But it had transformed into something beautiful, a testament to the power of honest love and hard work. She had learned that starting over was not just possible, but could lead to something better than what had come before. She had learned that accepting help was not weakness but wisdom, and that real strength came from facing your troubles head-on with courage and determination. Most of all, she had learned that love, real love, was not about perfection or easy circumstances. It was about finding someone who saw you clearly, with all your flaws and failures, and chose to stand beside you anyway. It was about building something together, day by day, choice by choice, until you had created a life neither of you could have built alone. Vincent had helped her start over without shame, and in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift of all, a future bright with possibility, a love deep enough to last a lifetime, and the knowledge that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. Together, they had turned debt into prosperity, shame into pride, and a chance meeting into a love story that would echo through generations. As Louise drifted off to sleep, safe in her husband's arms, she smiled. Her life had not turned out anything like she had planned all those years ago as a young girl in Missouri dreaming of the future. It had turned out better, richer, fuller than she had ever dared to hope. And it had all started with a cowboy who had seen her worth when she had nothing left but debts and despair, who had offered her a chance to rebuild without judgment or shame. That chance had changed everything. It had given her a life worth living and a love worth treasuring. And as she fell asleep beside the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, Louise Foster Vale knew that she was, without question, the luckiest woman in all of Arizona territory. The years rolled on, gentle and kind to the couple who had worked so hard to build their happiness. Vincent and Louise remained active well into their later years, still taking morning rides together when their health permitted, still sitting on the porch each evening to watch the sunset. Their children thrived, their grandchildren grew, and eventually great-grandchildren arrived to fill the ranch house with new life and laughter. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. The ranch house could barely contain everyone, 3 generations of the Vale family coming together to honor the love that had started it all. Samuel stood to make a toast, his own hair starting to gray at the temples. "To my parents, who taught me what real love looks like. Not the kind you read about in books, but the kind you live every day. The kind that shows up when times are hard, that works side by side through every challenge, that never wavers or quits. Thank you for showing us all how it is done." Everyone raised their glasses, and Louise looked around the crowded room with tears in her eyes. All of this, every single person here, had sprung from that dark day when she had stood alone with nothing but debts and fear. If Vincent had not come to her door, if she had not accepted his help, if they had not taken a chance on each other, none of this would exist. Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Vincent and Louise walked slowly to their room, his arm around her waist to steady her. Age had slowed them both, but it had not diminished their love. If anything, the years had only made it stronger, deeper, more precious. 30 years, Louise said softly. Where did the time go? Into building something beautiful, Vincent replied. Every single day was worth it. Even the hard days. The year the drought nearly broke us. The time Samuel fell from his horse and we thought we might lose him. All of those days too, especially those days. Because those were the days we learned what we were made of together. Those were the days that proved our love could weather any storm. Louise turned to face him, placing her weathered hands on his chest. I would do it all again, every moment, just to end up here with you. As would I, my love. As would I. They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 30 years of shared life, of triumph and struggle, of laughter and tears, of unwavering commitment. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Vincent Vale had ridden into Louise's life when she was at her lowest point, crushed under the weight of her dead husband's debts and lies. He had offered her a hand up without judgment, without expectation, without shame. He had believed in her when she could not believe in herself. He had loved her when she was certain she was unlovable. He had helped her build a new life from the ashes of her old one, and in the process, they had built something neither of them could have created alone. Their love was not a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real, earned through hard work and honest communication, tested by time and trials, and proven strong enough to last. It was the kind of love that transformed lives, that created legacies, that showed everyone who witnessed it what was possible when two people truly committed to each other and to building something worthwhile together. As Louise Foster Vale fell asleep on her 30th anniversary, she did so with no regrets, no what-ifs, no lingering shame from her past. She had lived a full, rich, meaningful life. She had been loved deeply and had loved deeply in return. She had raised children and helped raise grandchildren, had built a successful business, had contributed to her community, and had become a woman of strength and wisdom. But more than any of that, she had learned that it was never too late to start over, that accepting help was not weakness but courage, and that real love was not about perfect circumstances, but about perfect commitment. Vincent had taught her all of that and more, simply by being the man he was, by treating her with respect and dignity when she had neither, by seeing her potential and helping her realize it. They had built a love story for the ages, not in spite of the hardship that had brought them together, but because of it. Those struggles had forged them into stronger people and had created a bond that could not be broken. They had started with nothing but $100 debt and a desperate need, and they had turned it into a lifetime of wealth measured not in money but in love, family, and shared purpose. And as the years continued to pass, as Vincent and Louise grew older and eventually, many years later, passed peacefully from this world within months of each other, their legacy lived on. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons they had taught, about love and commitment, about helping others without judgment, about building something worthwhile through honest work and partnership. The ranch continued to thrive, generation after generation, a testament to what two people could build when they refused to let circumstances defeat them, when they chose love over shame, hope over despair, partnership over pride. And every Vale who came after heard the story of how it all began, with a cowboy who repaid a debt and a widow who accepted help, and how those two strangers became the foundation of everything that followed. It was a love story worth telling, a life worth living, and a legacy worth leaving. And it all started the day Vincent Vale rode up to Louise Foster's door and offered her a chance to start over, without shame, without judgment, with nothing but respect and genuine care. That simple act of kindness had changed everything, had created something beautiful and lasting that would echo through time long after both of them were gone. That was the power of love, true love, the kind that saw past circumstances to the person beneath, the kind that offered help without strings attached, the kind that built something together rather than demanding perfection from the start. Vincent and Louise had found that love, had nurtured it, had let it grow into something magnificent. And in doing so, they had proven that even the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest futures, that starting over was not an ending but a beginning, and that with the right partner, anything was possible. Their story ended as all stories must, with death and the passing of time. But the love they had built, the family they had created, the lessons they had taught, those things lived on. And somewhere in Arizona, on a thriving ranch built by two people who refused to give up, their great-great-grandchildren still told the story of Vincent and Louise, the cowboy and the widow, who had found each other in their darkest hour and had built a love that lasted forever.